Yep.
There we go. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Jamie Raisleger with Green Bay Doulas, and I am joined today by Dr. Sara Swift, OBGYN, and Fernanda Cobos Nicolete. Did I say that right?
Oh, yes.
And Fernanda is a client of Green Bay Doulas and also a patient of Dr. Swift. And we will get into her story in a little bit here. But we are here today because today is, or I should say October is National Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. And we're talking today in order to bring awareness to this topic that is so hard and is also really stigmatized in a lot of ways. And so we just think that it's really important to talk about. So we're really lucky to have both of you here today to give a little bit of information and also to share your stories. So thank you for being here today. Dr. Swift, I'm just wondering if, first of all, you could explain sort of the basics of miscarriage versus stillbirth, what that looks like, and what your experience is with that.
All right. So thanks for having me tonight. So the definition of miscarriage and stillbirth just has to do with the number of gestational weeks. So a miscarriage is defined a pregnancy loss that happens before 20 weeks of gestation, so 20 weeks from your from your last period. Majority of miscarriages are going to be first trimester miscarriages, so those that happen before 12 weeks of gestation. And then there's going to be a smaller portion that happen between, the 12 and the 20 week mark. A loss that happens after 20 weeks is considered a stillbirth. And those are about 1 in 100 pregnancies and in an unfortunate loss, either at the time of birth or, in those weeks preceding to that looming due date. And there's sort of numerous reasons for why a loss can happen at a certain gestational age. And sort of the further along in pregnancy we get, the risk tends to be sort of a bell-shaped curve, unfortunately. And I don't know if now is a good time to kind of go over those, or if you want to touch on those a little bit later, but I'll kind of defer that to you.
Yeah, go for it.
So a miscarriage that happens in the first trimester is usually going to be secondary to a genetic anomaly. So when you get pregnant, the egg and the sperm combine, and in that process, it's an imperfect science. And often a pregnancy will begin, and then for whatever reason, it stops. Sometimes the body will recognize it and say, hey, this pregnancy has ended, and you will start to bleed, and you lose your baby that way. Sometimes you continue to think that everything is fine, but your baby has actually stopped growing, and that heartbeat has stopped, and that's considered, unfortunately, a miscarriage. And there's various ways of treating, either one of those. But usually the body has this very sort of refined system in a way that kind of recognizes when something has gone wrong. And so the most common chromosomal abnormalities that we see in those first trimester miscarriages are going to be when you have 3 copies of a certain chromosomes, and there's sort of a number that we look for in those. There's more rare causes like infections, uncontrolled diabetes, some clotting problems that we can. And once somebody has had 2 or more miscarriages, we start to look at, okay, once we can say, okay, this is bad luck, by the time we hit the second or the third one, we have to start saying, okay, is there maybe something that we're missing? And even after 2 or 3 miscarriages, a woman is more likely to have a successful pregnancy than another loss. Now, once we get to the 20+ week mark, the majority of losses are sort of, we don't know why that happened. Is it because, an umbilical cord gets pinched? The more predictable ones or the more preventable ones are going to be your diabetic complications, your high blood pressure complications. So things that go wrong with the mom, and some of those we can and cannot, unfortunately, prevent, which just makes it so heartbreaking and so difficult to sort of deal with and predict. And help moms in that sense.
Thank you. Fernanda, would you like to share a little bit of your story, how you know Dr. Swift, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for allowing me to share a little bit more about my story and also my daughter. I'm originally from Brazil, then ignore my accent. I think mainly because I'm from Brazil, my husband is from Italy, we don't have anybody here. And I was pregnant, I got pregnant in October last year, and considering COVID, we knew that nobody would be here with us, right, our families. Then we decided to go for a doula, and then we hired Green Bay doulas, and Jamie was our main doula on that time. And I think in the middle of my process, I was looking for a more like humanized doctor that could be able to look to me and to my story. And then we decided to go with Dr. Swift, which was today, when I look back, I think was like a God's direction, because if I went through everything we went in with a different doctor and a different support, I think everything that was really traumatic would be much worse. And then in, I think, April, everything was perfect. I mean, I was with Dr. Swift. We had Jamie. Beatrice, that is the name of my daughter, she was perfect. I think we reached a point that we said, okay, everything is ready. But then with 34 weeks, beginning of June, we went for ultrasound, mainly because I couldn't feel her moving too much on that day. And unfortunately, there was no heartbeat anymore. And everything that we will share today, not only Beatrice's story, but also how Dr. Swift shared this with us, all the care or all the respect, all the options that I received, I think made all the difference for me to be here today and be able to stand up 4 months later and be able to talk. I'm sure that when I look right now back, I can see that the 3-4 days that I stayed there and I received all this care, I think this is a way that could help me to alleviate a little bit the pain that is of loss of baby, right? Then this is a little bit of the story. In the end, I mean, we figured it out that it was a true knot of umbilical cord. All the exams and tests, she was perfect. Unfortunately, it was an accident.
Thank you for being so vulnerable to share your story, because it's simply too painful for a lot of people to talk about. And it's really, I just want to say it's really an honor to hold the space for you, because in order for people to talk about it, they need the right container. And so it's always my goal, and I'm sure Dr. Swift's goal, to be a great container for the people that we come in contact with. So thank you for trusting us with the space that you're in right now. So Dr. Swift, you really touched on a few things, the causes, you know, a few things that may or may not be preventable in terms of loss. Once a loss has happened, first of all, is there anything else that you want to add to that?
Myself or Fernanda?
For you, for you. Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, the medical piece of it is, you know, is when we do the antepartum testing and in high risk women. But I think as a reminder that, you know, a loss can happen to anybody. And what I try to remind patients is that, you know, this is not your fault. Because I think automatically when something bad happens to us, we trace our steps back and we say, okay, you know, was it that I laid on my back, or was it that I took a warm bath, or, you know, we try to find reason for why this happened. I think in losses where we know why something happened, it's a little bit easier to understand why, and you kind of put the pieces together. And I think that the losses that we as physicians struggle with the most is those that we just don't know why, because you go through all this training, and medicine is what you do, and you eat, breathe, sleep it, and we want to have healthy moms and healthy babies, and when you can't accomplish that, it feels like such a, like you failed your patient, because they're looking to you to keep them safe and keep their babies safe. And when you can't keep them safe, when you even if you do everything right, every once in a while there's going to be one of those weird things in the universe that just happens. And I think that becomes difficult as a physician to accept, that bad things happen to good people. um, but especially when we don't know what happened or why it happened, I think that becomes really difficult to process, because if we know why something happened, maybe I can do better next time for you. We can do X, Y, and Z to help prevent that. And so I think whenever something bad happens, I always hope and pray that I can find out why, so that I can do better for you next time.
That makes a lot of sense. And as a doula, witnessing some of these events and, births that span an entire continuum, including loss, it makes me feel for the doctors and the nurses, as well as, the patients. And so that's actually really helpful insight in just knowing kind of what the physicians are going through as well, and just realizing that we're all human. And so that's just a takeaway that I have from that. How, Dr. Swift, how do you feel in general that the hospitals here in the US are prepared for losses to support patients in these times, outside of like your own personal compassion? What else is out there to support women and families?
So I think our resources are fairly limited. I'm going to be the first one to admit that, because overall these events are fairly rare, and I think we're so focused on the good things, and I think when we have a bad event, it makes us feel uncomfortable, and we as humans, I think, tend to run away from discomfort. In the last few years, we've come a long way as far as finding resources, and I think internet, and although as much as I have a love-hate relationship with Facebook, I think that has made the world smaller, that you can reach out to another lost mom. I think the big thing is that unless you have walked in those shoes, you really truly don't know what it is like. I can imagine, but I haven't been there. And sometimes when we go through these really tough things, it's really helpful to have somebody who's been there. So like when I have a patient who has a loss, I know that I can reach out to my fellow OBs, because they've been there and they understand that discomfort and that pain that comes along with it. My husband's a physician, but he's an internist. He doesn't get it in his business. People die. That's sort of the circle of life. What I do, babies aren't supposed to die. They're supposed to go home with their moms. It's supposed to be okay, because that's the story we're told. We're told you get pregnant, everything goes well, you have this cute baby that may or may not sleep, but we really sort of forget those moms that leave the hospital empty-handed, those moms that go home to an empty house, to an empty nursery. And I think we really sort of are not quite equipped to help with that. We have services that offer photography and handprints and footprints and all that, but that sort of touches really superficially on those mementos rather than really helping with the healing and the pain that comes with being a lost parent.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there for sure, and not something that any one person can fix, but I think talking about it is a really good place to start and address it. Fernanda, would you be willing to share through your experience, what were the things that really helped you in that immediate time frame and even beyond that immediate time frame to support you and to help get you through that time?
Sure. Yeah, I think before I go ahead and share, one thing that Dr. Swift touched is that we are living in a way right now that we are not being able to talk about death, right? And it's a so normal process. And I think COVID is bringing us to that place as well, that we need to see it. I mean, we need to use masks to stop talk and maybe see a little better and listen a little better. But in a way, my feeling is that we are afraid to talk about death, maybe because we don't know how to live the life, right? And then this became so scary. Then I think it's a really important conversation to have when we understand that life is more than what we are seeing here, right? Sometimes I feel our eyes are so poor because we cannot see nothing beyond. And if we are able to go ahead and be connected to something bigger than this, I think then maybe we connect ourselves to my child, for example, right? And then everything becomes a little not less painful, not less painful, but I think a little bit easier to go, you know. I think during the process of Beatrice, I feel that there are a few points that when we went through everything, I think right now, when I look back, I think those moments made a lot of difference for me. On that time when I went through everything, I was lost, I was numb. We don't know what to do. It's a situation that if you don't have people to carry you through the situation, you don't know, you don't have any power to decide anything or any conditions to decide anything. And I think the first thing that I see on my process is that all the supporting system I build up, right? The right doula, the right doctor, all the people carry me through that. I mean, helping me to go through, decided a lot of things with me and helping me through that. In all the points that I will share from my process, I think help me to leave the grief, but from a different perspective. Because if we don't have those points that I will talk about, has the power to abbreviate, I think, the grief. Not in of course, it will be painful anyway, but what I'm trying to say is that I can see good things as well. Right now, I'm able to look. I feel I would like my daughter here, of course, but at the same time, I can see all the change. I can see all the joy that she brought to our family, all transformation. I can stand in a different point and look to more than just the pain, right? And I believe she doesn't want me to be in the pain, right? But if I use the order of how everything happened, I think the first point is when Dr. Swift came to us. And of course, in US, it's different from where I came from. There is a technician that does the ultrasound. In Brazil, usually is the doctor. Then when the technician, she didn't say anything, we didn't hear the heartbeat, and she left the room, we knew that something was bad, right? Dr. Swift came and she started again the ultrasound, and then she communicated us that there was no heartbeat. But she communicated us from not from the doctor position. She was feeling, she was looking to us, she was feeling that. And I don't know, Dr. Swift, if you remember that, but you left the room and we spent some time, my husband and I, to cry, right? And when she was back, she told me, she held my hand, she told me, I'm so sorry because I was crying outside. And this is the first point that I want to bring here, because some doctors, some nurses, some doulas, some professionals, they believe that they cannot cry because this will make us feel worse. And in the end, nothing will make me feel worse. The pain of lost a child is the worst, period. The fact that Dr. Swift from that moment, she was crying, I understood that she was telling me, I can see your pain. I can see your daughter. I can see what you're going through. Then for me, it was like the first point, the first moment that, that time Dr. Swift was acknowledging what I was feeling. And this was one first step that I think was crucial for all the process that I myself and my husband, we passed through. Then, of course, all the hospital infrastructure in terms of, I know Dr. Swift was pushing and helping with all the hospital to putting me in a different room, far from other families. And maybe what I'm saying here is common, I don't know, but they put a sign on the door to let all the professionals know that on that room, we were passing through a loss of a baby. And seems simple, but if we need to, after 6 hours that you lost your child, if you need to tell to 10 different nurses that you lost a child, and everybody says, I'm so sorry, and then this will be much more painful, then those small changes made a lot of difference for me. Of course, the hospital, they prepare a memory box with prints, print hand and print foot, the mold of the hand and feet, pictures, the clothes, the blanket, everything, a little piece of a hair, a lot of things from her, which is the items that I have to bond with her and build up memories with her. And I think the second time where Dr. Swift showed up, and of course, the nurses, they were amazing with me as well. They were looking to Beatrice in a way that was really, really a joy for me. But I think the second time where Dr. Swift showed up was in the operation room, because in the end, she gave me all options. She supported me, whatever I would like to do. If it was a C-section or induction, she gave me all options, and she supported me in what I decided. I ended up decided for a C-section, and in the operation room, the doctor that was taking care of the anesthesia, I was seated in the operation room. Dr. Swift was in front of me. The doctor was working my back, and Dr. Swift asked me to put my body a little bit front, and she hugged me while the doctor was doing the procedure. And I don't know if you remember that, Dr. Swift, you told me we will go through this together. And when she said, both of us, we were crying, and on that time I was seeing that was how hard it would be for her, because I was in a patient position. I would be laid down on that operation room and they would do everything for me. But for her, she was feeling the pain because she was completely involved on the story, on our story, but she had to do a surgery on me as well. then all the support was incredible. And I think the third day that, or the third time that she showed up and made a lot of difference was I had Beatrice on Wednesday, and she offered me, look, you take your time with your daughter, because fortunately the hospital, they had the cuddle cot, and I was able to stay with Beatrice for a few days in the room, 100% of the time with us. And this also allowed us to build up the memories, right? I mean, everything we dreamed to do, at least a little bit, we did, right? We change her clothes, we carry her, we sing for her, we pray with her. I mean, it was like a 2-3 days that, of course, we will never forget, because it was the moment that we was able to stay with her. And on Thursday night, was probably 10:30 in the night, Dr. Swift came to the room to see me, to see how we were. Beatrice was there with us. And Dr. Swift held her and looked to her and said, Beatrice, I'm so sorry because I couldn't predict you. And I think it was a mix of a joy and of course it was extremely painful. I can stay the whole meeting here talking how painful it was, but I want to be able to share as well that those type of attitude made all the difference for me. I mean, she could see my daughter, she could see my pain, she could handle us. I mean, it was amazing. And I'm not saying that we should pass through this. I mean, I'm not saying that it's nice to pass through this. No, it's horrible. But when we pass through a situation like that, and we have people that can hold our hands, can listen to us, can walk us through the process, I think today I'm here, and I know, and I'm just here today because I had Dr. Swift, I had Jamie, I had the nurses, and they made our process much, much lighter. Everybody carry a little bit of the weight of loss of baby with us. I think those are the main points that for us, I mean, when I talk to my husband, for us, I think it's a life change.
So I get a little teary-eyed when you say that, because, you know, we remember those moments, right? So as a physician, you train to protect, and you know, we're surgically trained. I can get your baby out within minutes, and you know, we go into this because we want to help people and we want to save people, and sometimes we feel like a failure when we're unable to do so. And you mentioned that moment when I said, I'm so sorry, there's no heartbeat. And I think, you know, I still remember, you know, you looking at me and your husband looking at me, and you know, it's that moment where I straddle the present and the future, and I change your life, and not for the better. You know, I think that is so incredibly painful for us as physicians, and we try not to feel, because you try to protect your heart. And I think, you know, I don't, you know, I can hold my own. I can be, you know, a little rough around the edges and dominate an operating room. I'll be that person. But I think allowing yourself to feel in that moment, and as a physician, for a second, step away from that position and feel the pain and share in the pain. And I think it helps. You know, it's helpful to hear that it helps you as a patient, but as a physician, I think we also need to feel those things, because you can't keep piling things on, and because eventually you'll kind of explode, right? And luckily it's not a conversation that we have to have very frequently, but I think you're right about when you say you kind of go that you're in a shock, and you don't feel, and you don't hear, and it's sort of this out of body experience.
Mhm.
And I think when we think about grief, it's not a linear process. It
Mhm.
comes in waves. It sometimes it swallows you and pulls you out to the ocean, and sometimes it spits you out and puts you on the shore. And I think, going through that process is so painful. But if there's something that we can do to share in that experience and just lighten your burden even just a little bit, I think
Mhm.
then, I'm glad we're able to do that in some shape.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think it's important to talk about this. I mean, especially when we talk about physicians and OBs and nurses, because after everything happened with Beatrice, I started to study a little bit more about this and try to understand. I did some trainings in some of the institutions that they provided.
Mhm.
And I remember one day, one doctor was there doing the same training, and she was sharing that she was feeling really bad to cry, and she was trying to hold it. And I think, of course, it's not an easy process, but I think it's important to bring that for the families that are passing through that. I mean, this is a kind of a validation of what you're feeling. It's a kind of a validation of your pain, and this, in a way, helps. I mean, hold the emotions will not help the families. I mean, because the pain is the worst pain ever. Then I think it's a kind of in a way that the people can see it. What I'm facing. It's awful. And I think it's important to share because most of the physician, I think, especially here in US, they try to be very solid and black and white,
Mhm.
and I think it's part of the human being to feel emotions, and it's okay. We can integrate. We don't. There is
Mhm.
no bad and bad, good and bad, or we can have both, right? We can have all the emotions.
Thank you both so much for sharing. And I think about the families who have stillbirths, like your family, Fernanda. And I think about also the families who have early losses, who maybe feel like they aren't able to safely express some of these things, some of these feelings. And it's a lot of the same feelings. It can be. And yes, it's different. Of course, the experience is much different, but the feelings can be the same. And so I just want to acknowledge that as well. For although we're talking with Fernanda and Dr. Swift in detail about this experience, um, there are all different experiences with grief that draw people to this month of October and the cause that we're talking about. So I just want to acknowledge that for everybody who is watching this. And I know that I am open for conversations on this. Dr. Swift, is there something you want to say?
Well, I think it's the moment that you have a positive pregnancy test is when you become a mother, right? I
Yeah.
think we put so much emphasis on, the baby part of it, but I think the moment that you find out that you're pregnant, whether it is at 3 weeks, 3 days, or 8 weeks, or 12, or 24, or, sometimes at delivery, right? But I think that that moment changes us as humans, because we develop this idea in this world around this little being that we've never met, and we have hopes and dreams and expectations. And whether that loss is at 4 weeks 2 days, or 5 weeks, or whatever that week may be, that hurt can still be deep. And it's you know we should never say, oh, at least you weren't further along, because that although from a physical sort of laboring standpoint, that does matter, but still that pain can be so incredibly deep because we're mourning this child that we haven't met yet. And we often in our social circles, we don't share in that, and we don't share in that grief. And once you start talking to women, most women have had a loss, and it's not something that you share on your Facebook or whatever it may be, because I think we've focused so much on the positives that we've kind of forgotten about sharing in also our sorrows. And so whenever patients say, is it safe to say that I'm pregnant, I always encourage to say, share with those that you would want to support you through that grief, and really have a core group of people that you communicate with. We don't need a whole bunch of acquaintances. What you need is really a solid group of friends, and destigmatize the idea of a loss, regardless of when that happens.
And just one more thing, Jamie. Dr. Swift, you were saying about the early pregnancy loss. And one of those trainings that I was, they were sharing that the psychology diseases and stress are much higher in a loss before 12 weeks. Because the word, they don't recognize like early pregnancy, right?
Mm-hmm.
They say, oh, it's just an embryo, or okay, it's good that it was on the beginning. Then they were sharing that the diseases are much higher on those early stages, mainly because of this. And I think it's important to say that as soon as we got the positive, doesn't matter, right? I mean, everybody feels mom, and the expectations and plans and everything started from there.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. I think that has been a really great conversation. I thank you both for your time. Is there anything else that you want to add before we end the conversation today?
For me, I think I'm just so grateful to have both of you. I think Beatrice gave me a lot of thanks, and I think she could give me many gifts. And I think people that I could meet was one of them. And I'm so grateful because our destiny somehow crossed through her.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to be a part of this process with you and with your husband and with Beatrice too. So thank you for sharing. Thank you. Thank you.
So I echo Jamie's thoughts, and I thank you for trusting myself and my team to carry you through this, and whatever is to come. So always here for you.
All right. Well, with that, we will end. And if anybody watching is in need of support, we don't really have the three of us like a formal way, to support these people, but it will be posted through Green Bay Doulas at least. And I know Fernanda, you might be posting elsewhere as well.
Yeah.
And so on those channels, wherever you're watching this, go ahead and comment or reach out to us individually if you are in need of someone to talk to or whatever, and we will connect with you. So, all right. Thank you for watching, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.